Hi, and thank you for watching today's session on 10 steps to my next job. My name is Shannon Amaral. I'm the Career Services Program Specialist here at Fanshawe College. I work in the Employment and Student Entrepreneurial Services Department. We're located in D1063. In today's workshop, we're going to give you the steps to take when you're searching for your next job. You're going to need to work through identifying where you are in the job search and what actions it is that you still need to take. You're going to need to make sure you commit to taking these steps in order to conduct a successful job search. So step number one is I'm going to give myself lots of time. So job search takes time and effort, so you don't want to be leaving anything for last minute. If you're not ready to start actively looking for work, there's still plenty of things you can do ahead of time to prepare you in advance for a job search. How long do you think it takes the average Canadian to find work after graduation? Do you think it's 2 weeks, 1 month, 4 months, 8 months? Well, the answer is after looking at reports over the last 6 years, it appears that the average is around a 4 to 5 month window. In addition to that recent data on LinkedIn, it shows that it takes about 4 months from the time you start following a company to the time you start working with them. That 4 to 5 month window is referring to the length of time it takes to find a job after graduation. For those of you that might be looking for part-time work or some additional cooperative education opportunities, it may not take you as long, but you still want to give yourself at least a 4 to 8 week window. If you're someone watching today's session and you need to find a job immediately, then the focus on your spare time should be spent on job search activities, which we'll be discussing today, and we'll strongly encourage you to connect with your career services consultant as soon as possible. Step number 2 is I must understand what I have to offer and what I'm looking for. So it's so essential to understand what it is that you can offer these employers. That means looking at your strengths, your skills, your interests, and your preferences, and to understand what types of jobs and companies and industries you are looking at before you start your job search process. So really understanding what it is important to you in a job. Is it the environment? Is it the values? Is it the job task you'll be doing? Is it their service or products that they provide? Is it their clients or customer base? Having answers to these questions provides a focus in your job search and helps you in tailoring your application to those particular companies and industries. Oftentimes what we hear is students will say, I'm not picky, I just want to find any job. So what happens is they go ahead and they create what we call a generic resume and do a wide general job search without really understanding what it is that they're looking for or what it is that they can offer that particular employer. This is one of the largest, job search mistakes, that what happens is you end up resulting in spending so much more time, a much longer amount of time in your job search than what's really necessary. So when someone goes ahead and hands out a resume that has not been tailored to that particular job or that company, the employer can tell that that individual hasn't gone through and really thought about how they would be a good fit for the company. So what we're telling you here today is you don't want to go ahead and print off 25 copies of the same resume. When you're trying to appeal to everyone, at the end, you end up appealing to no one. Step number 3 is I will prepare all self-marketing materials before I start applying. So as we discussed with the previous slide, all self-marketing materials must be targeted to that particular audience. So that means that industry, that company, that employer. And when we say self-marketing materials, we're talking about your resume, which is mandatory. Cover letter, depending on the position you're applying for, if it's stated if it's mandatory or not. Your references. Maybe you have possible reference letters. Maybe you're somebody who has a portfolio or a website that's able to showcase the work that you do. A LinkedIn profile. And lastly, we've included professional and private social media accounts as well. So again, today we're just advertising to let everyone know when our workshops are running. So please do always keep an eye on logging into your FOL account, your Fanshawe Online account, going to the top menu of resources, selecting career, co-op, and CCR, and selecting the events page. Our calendars are updated monthly with workshops pertaining to resume, cover letter writing, how to ace your interview. So just keep an eye on those available workshops. Step number 4 is I will effectively manage my time during my job search and record all my activities. So oftentimes as job seekers, we misuse our time by spending too much time on what we call ineffective methods, such as spending hours and hours on Indeed. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we progress through the workshop. But it's so important to plan how much time you will spend on each job search activity in order for you to be able to manage your time most effectively. On the next screen, I'm just going to give you an example of a pie chart of how you might divide up your time in your job search. But you really want to make sure that you record all your job search activities, including the dates of when you did things, when you should be following up. This will help you to keep track of where you've applied to, who have you spoken with, what's the status of your application, all in one central location. You can use whatever method of recording works best for you, but we will also provide you a sample that's available on your FOL account when you log into the events page. There's also an icon there that's a Fanshawe toolkit where you can also access all this information here today. There's a record spreadsheet that you can record all of the places where you've been submitting application. And there is also a really great handout that can take along with this particular workshop that walks you through steps 1 to 10. So as I said earlier, this is the pie chart I was referring to. This is just an example of how you might divide up your time. Let's say, for example, you have a 3-hour gap on a Thursday between your classes that you have designated for job search. How might you divide up your time throughout that day? It's obviously going to be helpful if you, keep track of your free time over a course of a week to see how much time you have available to devote to your job search. But we just want you to remember that time spent should be based on spending the most amount of time on job search methods that are most effective. And we're going to talk about that in the next couple slides. Obviously, a person's industry, as well as the length of time they have to find a job, may affect how much spare time they have. If you are somebody watching today's session and you are fairly early in your job, let's say in your job search, there's still a lot you can do ahead of time. Maybe you're going to be spending more time doing career exploration activities. Maybe you're going to be attending some additional career services workshops. Maybe you're still in the stage of developing and creating your resumes and cover letters. So you can see here on the pie chart here, we've listed how much time. So maybe you might do, 20% of warm contacts, 30% of networking, 10% maybe goes towards your cold contacts, 20% towards the career services job site, and lastly, online job boards, an additional 20%. Throughout this workshop, if you hear me reference the words warm contacts and cold contacts, just remember that your warm contacts are people that you currently already know, and your cold contacts are going to be people you found through your research, but you don't know them yet. So the number one question is, how do we find work? What do you think is the most effective way to find a job? Do you think it's going to be going through online job boards, through personal contacts, unsolicited applications by email? The answer is 80% is through personal contacts. So what does that mean? That means 80% of your time should be spent connecting with other people. This is why it's so important that you must manage your time appropriately to ensure that you're spending the large majority of your time making those new connections and reaching out to your current connections. So making new connections and also reaching out to your current connections as well. So step number 5 says, I will make a list of all my connections I already have, again, warm contacts, and research them. So what we would suggest for you today is create a list of who you already know. Where do they work? Look at the employers, their companies, the organizations. Maybe it's a nonprofit institution. Maybe it's an entrepreneur, a small business. And what you want to do is, what information should you be researching about your connections? Here's a couple things that just to get you started on things that you should research. So research your current connections to learn about all things that goes along with anything else you want to know about them or the industry or the organization they work for. LinkedIn is obviously a great place to start your research. If any of your connections are workplaces or possibly potential employers, you want to make sure you're researching them. You want to research that particular organization's mission statement. Know what the values are and what the purpose is of that company. Look at their customer clientele base. Look at the size of the organization. Is it a family-run business versus a corporation? Is it a global company versus a local company? What's the culture of the company? Are they conservative, relaxed, let's say progressive? Or are they through an HR department that's publicly traded? So look at all those information when you are doing your research. And what you want to do as you continue with your research is, as you research, you want to start keeping notes of things that you might want to ask these connections and what we call an informational interview. If you hear me use the word informational interview, what it means is basically it's a short conversation. It can be done by email. It can be done by phone. It's basically inquiring about a person's career path or educational path, maybe inquiring about their job, their company, their industry, to help them learn more about them. It's not an opportunity for you to ask for an interview or ask for a job. It's more about to find out information. So maybe you're going to be finding out that's who you can attention a resume to. So just keep those factors in mind. Maybe ask for an informational interview. Obviously, some of the information you learn when you do your research is going to help you to learn whether or not you should be applying in person or versus applying online. If your contact works, let's say for a very small organization, you may learn that it's best to apply in person. Whereas if somebody works at a large corporation like 3M, for example, then you may learn that you must apply through a staffing agency or directly through their own website. So step number 6 is I will identify new people and companies to apply to. Again, my cold contacts by researching potential employers and people working in the types of jobs I'm interested in. So research for contacts in your community that you want to work in. So start off by creating a list of all the cold contacts and record all the details you want to remember about them in your job search record. Yes, it's going to feel like it's going to take a lot of time, but once you get that process started, it won't be as much work as you think it is. You also want to make sure you research any particular details about your cold contacts the same way you would have done with step number 5, which was your warm contacts. So your cold contacts and your warm contacts, you want to follow that same process as well. And you might be asking, well, where can I find these cold contacts? What kind of sources can I use? Here's a few examples just to get you started. These are places that you can research to find some cold contacts. Number 1 is going to be the Career Services job site. We've listed down LEDC, which stands for London Economic Development Corporation. LinkedIn, but you obviously want to make sure that you have your profile is complete before you make anything searchable on your profile. We've listed down Eventbrite. There's all obviously industry trade news outlets. One that comes to mind is Business London magazine. It's basically an online publication for a particular industry. You may have to sign up to be part of their email list. There's professional association sectors and unions, but obviously you need to become a student member. Refer to your professors and your school contacts as well. Other directories, I know we mentioned LEDC, but you also want to look at the Healthline, the Retail Council of Canada. We've listed down here Google as well, because you don't want to just be looking at the first page of results, because you might be missing out on some of those smaller companies that don't pay into those large advertisement costs. And we said social media. You want to follow industries and people in particular social media platforms. And we'll give you some examples just on the next screen here. So social media obviously is such a powerful tool to connect you with companies and recruiters and those valuable contacts. But obviously remember, with social media, while social media offers us those valuable insight into those companies, their products, just remember that LinkedIn is specifically designed to support job seekers and professionals wanting to build and grow their network. Remember also that some industries are turning to LinkedIn as their primary recruitment tool as well. But you also want to keep in mind that there are, companies that vary in terms of which social media platform they use. Instagram is obviously going to be more often for someone, their first choice for companies that are very, visual, artistic, or design related industries. And remember, you also want to search for groups that might be helpful. Another great example is if you have a Facebook account. There's a Facebook group called Now Hiring London and Area. Another great tool to be able to connect yourself to those opportunities. Step number 7 is I will take the initiative and contact the people and companies I identified and research in step 5 and 6. So remember, a successful job search is really all about building relationships and talking to people. So one great example we'll take away for today is, let's say, ask yourself, who is your top 1 to 3 people or companies? It can be your warm or cold contacts that you want to connect with as soon as possible. And mark this information on a sheet of paper or in the workbook that you can find in the toolbox through your FOL. But before you start contacting anyone, you really want to be sure about, what is your purpose for contacting them? Are you looking to name, for a name to address an application to? Are you asking information about an interview? Are you inquiring about a certain job opportunity? Listed here on the screen, these are just some examples, suggested templates just to get you started. You're obviously going to have to adjust your content based on the reason for contacting them. But what might you say when I call or email them? So these are just some great examples. You can see on the one side, we have an email version, and on the other side, it's a phone call version. So let's say you're sending an email to a particular employer. What can you say? You could start off saying, as a marketing student interested in online sales, I'm interested in speaking with someone who's experienced in product promotion using social media. You always want to make sure that before you connect with anyone, that you have what we call our elevator pitch, what we will say upon contacting them. So practice that, use this as a template just to get you started, and just make sure you fill in the blanks using your workbook as well. Step number 8, I will only spend 20% of my time looking at online job boards. Why is that? Because as we discussed through the workshop, 80% of jobs are found through that personal contact and networking. So as a general guideline to protect yourself from those fraudulent job postings, do not simply apply through jobs postings such as Indeed. Instead, look for job postings from companies that you have done your research, that you are interested. And if it's possible, you have more of a direct way of applying to those job openings, such as through their company's website. You obviously want to remember that, unfortunately, fraudulent job postings are becoming not only more frequent, but these fraudsters are also becoming more and more sophisticated in their ways. So you want to make sure that you're protecting yourself with all your personal information that is being uploaded. So if there's any mention throughout an application process, if anybody is mentioning anything about transferring or depositing of money, Bitcoin, asking you for social insurance number, please ensure that that is most likely a scam. You don't want to be giving any of your personal information as well. The only time any employer should be asking you for personal sensitive information is when you've been invited you've applied for a position, you've been invited for an interview. You've now completed the interview. Now they want to contact your references. And now they are providing you with what we call an offer of employment. If there is some kind of contract or an agreement, that is the only time you should be providing them your personal details, like your social insurance number. Here's just a couple examples of online job boards. There's several other ones that we can include in this today, but there's just a few job boards that our team in career services have found most effective for many people. Use whatever job board that gives you the best results for your particular job search goal. And again, remember, those professional associations or industry sector councils obviously have their own job boards. But again, you may be required to have a membership to be able to access them. But also make sure you do your own research, the job boards that are particular to your particular industry. You don't want to just go ahead and post your resume on online job boards like Indeed, because as we said earlier, that's going to cause, maybe create some more suspicious and fraudulent job postings. So it's a much better way to apply directly to a job opening or companies that you have researched and are interested in. Step number 9 is I will apply exactly how the employer has requested and on time. So once you've gone ahead and you've created and targeted your resume and cover letter for each job that you're applying to, you want to be sure to apply in the manner requested in that job posting through that personal contact before the deadline date. And why is that? Because many employers are using this as part of their screening tool itself. How accurately can you follow instructions? So when you're applying through an online job board, make sure your documents are obviously acceptable to an ATS tracking system. For those of you that are watching today's session, if you don't know what an ATS tracking system is, it's basically you can't have all those extra flares. Your resume needs to be very simplified in terms of headings. You have your standard headings like highlights of qualification, experience, education, and maybe you'll have other sections of your resume. You can't have any photos or any graphics on your resume when you are applying through an ATS tracking system. You can also feel free to watch how to beat an ATS tracking system workshop, or feel free to refer to the handout that is available in the toolkit through your FOL account. So step number 10 is I will follow up on every interaction I have during my job search. Why is that so important? It's so important because every job search interactions you have should always have some sort of a follow-up, whether that's an email or a phone call, unless the job posting clearly states do not contact them. But when you are connecting with these employers, it's going to help you to build a positive relationship and maintain those connections within your industry. It's always a great opportunity for you to be able to reinstate your interest and fit for the job. You always want to make sure that you send those thank you notes after every initial contact when you're networking to anyone who helps you out or gives you information. So kind of as a rule of thumb, in terms of follow up on all submitted applications, for any submitted applications, you want to be about approximately 5 to 7 days after the application deadline or the date submitted if there is no job posting. So refer to that 5 to 7 business days. So just remember that does not count the Saturday and Sunday, which is a weekend. You also want to be prepared that as a follow-up phone call could possibly turn into a screening interview. So make sure that if you're somebody making that call, you're in a quiet location, you have your resume, you have your notes, and you have your job search record spreadsheet handy as well. You also want to make sure that you judge how often you should be following up based on how each interaction goes with each employer, because you want to make sure that you're being respectful of that employer's time as well. And lastly, you want to keep track of when you should be following up on that record search template. So keep that in mind and make sure that you record all the applications. So my action plan is my job search record. So now that you've made it through the 10 steps to your next job, you should have a pretty good idea of the work that is that you still need to do. That workbook that I mentioned earlier is available through your FOL under your toolkit. You will see it labeled as 10 steps to my next job workbook. So with that workbook, start recording in your action plan moving forward in your job search, what it is you want to do. Earlier, we talked about maybe give yourself a goal, pick your top, 1 to 3, warm or cold contacts that you want to connect with right away, and keep that information marked in your job search record as a goal for you to reach. Once you start recording all the information in your job search record, and that includes the dates, the tasks, the outcomes, what your efforts were, you're going to start to notice, a job search pattern in many of these areas that you may require further assistance in. Let's say when it comes to your resume and cover letter, have you sent out 50 resumes but with no response? Why is that? Is that because it's a lack of opportunities found? Is your job search being too narrow? Are you not researching enough? What about interview preparation? Have you had 10 interviews, but you've had no job offer? Is it the way that you're answering the questions? Is it the way you're conducting yourself in that, in that particular moment? So having answers to these questions will help us in career service to determine what it is that we can further assist you on. So just remember, if you want guidance or you get stuck anywhere along the way, please do make an appointment with your career services consultant and don't hesitate to check in with us regularly. We also want you to remember, remind yourself that job search takes time and effort, and it's not always a smooth process. But be mindful to make sure that you take care of yourself during your job search. Make sure you use all the resources are available to you, like the Career Services Department, counseling, and the FSU department. If you're wanting to connect with your career services consultant, please do scan the QR code shown on the screen, and you'll be able to connect with your career consultant. Your career consultant's name will be listed, followed by their email and the schools that they represent. And this brings us back to our very last page of any questions. If anybody has any questions with the information presented, please do connect with us here in Career Services. This is what we're here for. We're here to help you. Thank you so much for watching, and take care.